This week in Hong Kong, Catholic media tycoon and pro-democracy activist Jimmy Lai's mitigation hearings have wrapped. Essentially, this is Jimmy Lai's last chance before sentencing in a trial that could see him spend the rest of his life in prison. Is there hope of leniency and release? Here to discuss all of this, Director of the Center for Religious Freedom at the Hudson Institute, Nina Shea. Nina, thank you for being here. We've followed, of course, Jimmy's case closely for years. This week, the Hong Kong High Court is hearing this mitigation plea, which is essentially his lawyer's last chance to try to get him out of an extended sentencing here, a long incarceration. What's actually happening in the courtroom or happened there? I know there were 4 days of hearings, but what are his chances under this national security law at this point?
Well, Raymond, I'm glad you're focusing on this again. It is his last chance. They are focusing, the defense, Lai's lawyers focused on his health and the deterioration of his health and the fact that he's 78 years old. He has many problems of heart problems and blood pressure problems, diabetes that he developed actually in prison over the last 5 years, solitary confinement. So he's already, in a sense, served 5 years. He's been 5 continuous years in solitary confinement in a maximum security prison in Hong Kong. He only has visits, I think 1 hour, 2 hours a month by his family members. He doesn't see any other person. There's no one else in the cell block. So under these, and he doesn't see daylight directly.
Wow.
So he has no contact with nature or people. So that must be very taxing on anyone. And so they're arguing that because he's served 5 years, because he's done this, because he's in this health situation, and because he actually didn't, do any violence. I mean, he lit a candle in a vigil. That's one thing he did. That they charged him with and convicted him for, and also meeting with international figures. As a journalist, as a media tycoon, of course he's meeting with international figures. That's what they do. So they're making these arguments. And to answer your question, no, I don't have any expectation of leniency. I think that the only way that he can avoid spending the rest of his life, however long it is, and not dying in prison is if there is some kind of deal made with either our government or the UK government, like a trade, like a prisoner trade, for example.
Well, you have extensively covered over many years Jimmy's declining health. The family claims his teeth are rotting, his nails are falling off. President Trump's asked Xi Jinping to release him on humanitarian grounds. I know 5 UN experts made the same plea. The prosecutors in the case, in other words, the Chinese prosecutors against Jimmy, they say his health is unremarkable. That's the quote. Is this regime, I mean, is there any possibility that you foresee, given the direction of this? I mean, there were diplomats sitting at the hearing. Isn't public pressure, Nina, perhaps, the best way to get leniency or release in Jimmy Lai's case?
Well, definitely public pressure, and to show that he is considered a hero, a kind of martyr witness, that he stood for his principles and is a harmless person. He's not, doesn't have, he was treated like a cartel director by these, drug cartel head, capo, by these Chinese officials. They had him in shackles, I think it was 10 pounds of chains, while he was being transported back and forth to the jail and to the court. And snipers on roofs, and as if he was going to be kidnapped, taken by SEAL Team 6 or, SEAL Team 6. They put on this big performance art that he's a dangerous criminal. So the more the West stands up for him, because I say the West because the Chinese people themselves cannot say anything. Cardinal Zen, as you know, was in Rome last week, and he spoke about other things concerning the church, but he did not speak publicly about China. And that's because he's under the gun as well. He has a national security law investigation on his head. So no one in China, not 1.4 billion people, there's not one who can speak out on his behalf except his lawyers.
Oh.
And so it's really incumbent on us to speak up about him. Maybe the Chinese would not want to martyr. Maybe they would not want to make a hero. His is the only name we know, that anyone really knows in America of a political prisoner in China. How many others can you mention?
Well, there are many others. I mean, you've documented some of them. This isn't happening in isolation, and it's a pity. It's a tragedy that the Catholic Church, the Vatican, and the Church at large don't give more voice to these martyrs, and they're living martyrs or dead martyrs in some cases. But there are 7 Roman Catholic bishops whom you've detailed over the years are indefinitely without trial in China. They're just being held. You mentioned Cardinal Zen. It was a miracle they allowed him to attend the consistory, Nina. But again, he couldn't talk about anything related to China. What does Jimmy Lai's conviction tell us about the state of religious freedom, press freedoms, and basic human rights in this Chinese communist rule?
Well, that's exactly right. He's the personification of all the repression and injustice going on in China today. It's good that his name has been elevated because it's becoming more of a household name. There's more name recognition there in the West. And we need to know that there are legions of political prisoners in China's jails. They are tortured, they're raped, they're treated cruelly, that they're in these horrible conditions that deteriorate, where their health deteriorates, and some are killed. Some are killed for their organs, and we avert our eyes from that. We deny it. There's been a lot of denials of it, but we must recognize, without a doubt, that is what is happening to religious prisoners in China today. Whether it's Falun Gong, whether it's the Uyghurs, even Christians are having their organs removed forcibly and harvested. And there are 2 books coming out on this. I hope it becomes better known. I don't think it's going to happen to Jimmy Lai. They'd like to take young prisoners. But I did talk to a Christian, Raymond, who was a prisoner in China, and he had a complete blood workup and tissue typing consistent with organ harvesting while he was in prison before he was able to get out. So there are atrocities that are beyond belief going on in China today and in Hong Kong, and Jimmy Lai stands for that. I mean, his case stands for that, and he reminds us all that it's going on.
Yeah, I had to laugh out loud, Nina. This article appeared from CGTN. That's the official Chinese media organ of the Chinese government. They have an article that reads, "Inside Jimmy Lai's sentence hearing, what he sowed, he now reaps." The propaganda of this group, and the outrageous thing is the collaboration of people in the West with what is a regime mouthpiece. You know, and there's collaborators in Europe, there are collaborators in the United States. They are enabling death and the prosecution and persecution of the faithful and the freedoms of good people who are just trying to live their lives in their faith. So we're going to keep our eye on this Jimmy Lai case, but it's just, it enrages me every time I see it. But just before Christmas, another case that you just weep every time you read one of these stories. I know you do, Nina. At least 20 Christians were killed in coordinated attacks in 2 Nigerian states. And this was after a missionary based in Iowa warned Nigerian authorities that these attacks were coming. The authorities dismissed the warning. President Trump, as you know, designated Nigeria as a country of particular concern for religious freedom violations. We talked about that before in 2025. And he recently launched airstrikes against the Islamic State forces there. What is actually happening on the ground now, Nina? And why does this Nigerian government seem either unable or, more likely, unwilling to stop these attacks?
Yeah, well, on the ground, it's the same pattern is continuing, Raymond, unfortunately. It's really horrifying. Last Saturday night, 10 more Christians were murdered under the same pattern. They're farmers, they're in rural areas. This was in Taraba State, in the Middle Belt again. Fulani militias, jihadis coming in and slaughtering them. They're absolutely defenseless. And, 20 churches have burned since Christmas as well. kidnappings. There's still, something like 15 prisoners, hostages being imprisoned by these jihadi groups, Christians, since December. So it's going on. The other thing that's going on, though, since President Trump declared it a country of particular concern for religious persecution the end of October, the government has acknowledged that Christians are being persecuted, the government of Nigeria, that is. And that's important first step, but it's a very first step. Others, Nigerians themselves, Christian leaders, are starting to talk about it. And I asked them, I'm hearing from them, and I asked them, why now? Why didn't you talk about it before? It's been going on for years. And they said, well, in this culture of impunity, where the government doesn't take any action, there's no point to it. It could only risk our own lives. So they're risking their own lives now, hoping that the culture of impunity has ended, that the government will take action. But so far, I'm sorry to say, there hasn't been any meaningful action.
Well, we will keep our eyes on it. Nina, I thank you for continuing to watch this. You can find Nina Shea's reporting on persecution of Christians worldwide at hudson.org. Thank you, Nina.
Thank you, Raymond.